Howdy, everybody. Hey, so real quick, before we get into this, just let me know, is the audio sound okay? Last Friday live, we had a little bit of audio hiss. Haven't been able to figure out what that was, and I kind of was hoping it was a fluke thing, but if it continues, what I'm gonna do, I think it just has to do with my microphone. We'll just continue on with the presentation, and I just won't talk very much. So welcome everybody, give everyone a couple of seconds here. We got a pretty cool thing for you tonight. We normally do this on the Offcuts channel, but this is really kind of for everybody to get a preview of a project that's coming up in the guild. So I wanted to give you an opportunity. Okay, good. If it sounds good, let's move on. So welcome everybody, thank you for hanging out with me. We were running a little bit late tonight. Dinner ran a little bit late, so I've got a salad here. So while we do the watch party, I'm gonna eat my salad. Are you guys like salad before dinner, during dinner, or after the main meal kind of people? I change between like during dinner and after dinner, just depending on my mood. Anyway, it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight. So tonight we're gonna show you a little preview of the Slat back, changed the name a couple times, the Slat back platform bed project that's starting in the guild tomorrow. This is your opportunity to see just kind of the depth of the content that we do in the guild. Gives you an idea of what the various topics are going to be. But this video is very cut up. It's a piece of each part, and there's 9 parts in the whole series. I got the numbers here. It's a total of 167 minutes. We're gonna give you the plans for both Queen and King, though the one that I built is the king size, so that's the only numbers that I reference in the video, but you'll have all the measurements for Queen. Cool thing about queen size is it's just the length is the same front to back, but the side to side is just a little bit shorter, which is pretty cool. So you could build that size if you want to. The other thing is I'm going to be playing a pre-made video here for you guys. Something I can't control is sometimes the audio and my lips kind of get a little bit out of sync, especially for something like a 21-minute video that's playing through the stream like this. I don't know why it happens. It's technology. What are you going to do? Okay, so let's get started here. I will see you at the end of this. Any questions you guys have about this, please let me know. Watch the preview. You still have tonight and tomorrow to get the sale price on this thing. It's all at thewoodwhispererguild.com. Slat back platform bed. Here's the preview. So please enjoy. Today we are going to build this beautiful walnut bed. It's a king size bed. You could of course resize it to whatever size you like. Features some half lap joints in the frame. It's got a nice platform design, so it kind of creates the illusion of having very little support, but we do have a lot of support in the middle. This is for my mom, and she dictated how much storage room she wanted underneath, so we had to take that number plus a total height where we knew the mattress would come to develop all the measurements for this structure. The legs are on the insides, tapered a little bit. Same thing in the back, just for a little bit of style. And the headboard is tapered back slightly by a few degrees. That just gives it a little bit more of a slicker profile. And the slats across the back have been pillowed to give them a softer look. All right, so there's a lot to the project. Let's head into the office, and I'll use the SketchUp drawing to show you some of the details in the joinery and how everything goes together. All right, so here's Mom's big square bed. So let's dig into the lumber we're going to use for this project. We're going to go through quite a bit of 8/4 stock. Now, we've got some very thick legs that are about 3.5 inches square. Well, I picked that number on purpose. You're very lucky to have super thick material. You can make things like the legs out of a single board, but you gotta have really thick stuff. So the 3.5 accounts for the fact that most of us can access 8/4 material. And if you put 2 pieces of 8/4 together, you can get it down to about 3.5 once it's a finished thickness. So that's kind of the perfect size, and that's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna have a bunch of glue ups to get the thickness that we need. But we also need some really long pieces because we've got long side rails, we have a front, and there's no back rail, but we do have that front rail, support pieces, the frame pieces. This is some impressively wide stock. I've got a board here that's almost 16 inches wide, and it really kind of hurts me a little bit to cut it just because I think it's great. When you have a nice wide piece of walnut like this, I would love to see this incorporated into a tabletop, but it's also not a bad thing to, make it into a bed for your mother. These rough pieces will be ripped rough at the bandsaw, but I'd like at least one edge to be cleaned up first. With that clean edge against the fence, I can start ripping the parts. Everything is still very much oversized at this point. Notice the gloves? I almost never wear them with power tools, but this operation requires me to have a strong grip on a heavy and long workpiece, so the gloves allow me to safely maintain control. My hands are also a generous distance from the blade. All the pieces are now cut to rough length. So now it's time to make our mortises. You could just pick a face, lay out your mortise and go, or you could put a little bit more thought into it. And that's really what fine woodworking is all about. It's about finding those little details, putting a little bit of extra thought. And sometimes that's all it takes to make your piece go from good to great. You should be really careful about this because as the taper comes up through, if at any point we cut through that glue line, and that's on the front face, that glue line is going to look awful. Now I'm going to cut this mortise with a router, but if I can get some of that material cleared out of the way ahead of time, why not do that? So I've got a 1-inch Forstner bit, and I can make 2 cuts and get quite a bit of material out of the way. Just make sure that you are only plunging in that 1-inch depth. Love that noise. Now for the center leg of the headboard, we've got a mortise that's just a little bit narrower. That gives us a little bit more room on both sides here so it's not too weak. And I don't really feel comfortable going with a 1-inch bit here. Cuts it a little bit too close because it's a 1-inch mortise. So I switched down to a 3/4 inch Forstner bit. That should give me some breathing room. Now, while it may seem like I'm making a little bit of extra work for myself, I'm going to disassemble this little setup here so that I can access my large, the headboard mortises, because they have the same dimension from the inside, right? So while my router is in this first position, I want that exact same cut on my larger legs. So we'll just disassemble. Put these out of the way for now. And then I'll do each of my large legs with that same setting. Now, one of the challenges we face when making a bed is how to get the pieces apart. It sort of needs to knock down because a king-size bed frame, even though it might not be totally, heavy, it's actually something that's really difficult to get through doorways if you can't break it down. With the bit turned so that it's parallel to my fence, I can get the furthest extremity of this top point here. So I'm just going to bring one of my work pieces just to the point that it makes contact. Then I'll take a Sharpie, draw a line. So next up, we're going to start working on our rails. We've got 2 side rails, a center rail or center support, and then the front rail. So it's going to be a mixture. There's a couple different tenons that we need to make, but the side rails have a tenon at the back and a dovetail at the front. The center support gets tenons on both ends, and the front piece gets tenons on both ends. So we will do all the tenons first, and then we'll take our time to focus on those dovetails, which might be a little bit more challenging. Now, the 1/4 inch looks pretty good. I think I'm happy with the blade height. And my 1-inch fence setting, it looks it's maybe a little bit short. I could probably cut in a little bit deeper on that shoulder. But this is sort of a detail I don't think many people discuss. It's just one of those things you get a feel for over time. But let's go into it. So really, that shoulder totally depends on the depth of this mortise, okay? And we're talking about really nitpicky stuff here. So if I'm just a little bit under 1 inch, And if we know that this guy is exactly an inch, this might be okay, because you really don't want your tenon to bottom out in the mortise. You want a little bit of room for some glue, a little bit of breathing room there. So when I take a measurement of my actual mortise, looks like I am, see there's my 1 inch line, and boom, I go a little bit further. So I am actually a little bit proud of an inch. If this is a little bit under an inch, that leaves maybe what I would consider a little bit too much material here. So I am going to make a change to the fence, bring this to pretty much exactly an inch. And since this is just a hair over an inch, and I can't do anything about that already because it's already locked in place, I think we should be able to get a nice little bit of air gap behind the tenon, right? So with this setup now, all I really need to do is bring my workpiece and carriage in place. And you'll immediately see once you have this, how secure this is. The 2 clamps, the extra vertical surface here, and of course, this length of the carriage, that actually makes this feel so much more secure and safe. So that once I have everything in place, I can just kind of slowly push through the cut, pull back, and then I could readjust for my second cut. So let's fire up the router, get this thing done. So next up, I want to focus on the headboard. We need to make mortises for those back slats. So I've basically got everything set up for the proper depth, the proper offset using the guide here. And this time, because I have nice, obvious white marks that'll be easy to see, I am going to use some dust collection. So that should make cleanup a little bit easier. One trick I sometimes use for really accurate start and stop points is to plunge the start and stop points first. Then I go back and remove the material in between. And this is pretty easy to do when you have a fairly shallow mortise. So unfortunately, after I did a little cleanup cut on the side that I saw a little bit of checking, it turns out that there's way too much checking and I'm a little bit concerned. So I really still want to use these boards for this. So what I'm going to do is before splitting it in half and resawing them in half, I'm going to pour some epoxy in here, let that sit overnight, and with any luck, it'll trickle down far enough that when I actually make those cuts, it'll be filled with epoxy, and a lot of that will become tenon on the piece once we actually do the final milling. So both of my pieces are like this. So epoxy fill it is, leave it overnight, hope for the best. So just gonna take a little bit of masking tape and just do this to build a little container, a little dam. So I usually use West Systems epoxy, 2-part epoxy, or Total Boat works really well. Stuff is nice and thin, so it will push its way down into those cracks, hopefully far enough to be effective. So we'll just let that sit on there for a little bit and absorb. You'll see some bubbles popping up here and there. So next up, we're gonna build the top frame that sits on top of the base that we've built already. Now, this frame is, it's there for support, but it's also going to create a frame for those inner slats, but most of this frame will not be visible in the final bed. We'll have maybe a little bit poking out, but because it overhangs and it actually exceeds the dimensions of the mattress, it sticks out. And anything that sticks out on a bed is a shin catcher. Or even when you get out of the bed, you swing your legs down, you really don't want the back of your legs, your calves, to run into a piece of wood. It's not ideal. So the frame in and of itself doesn't have to be the best material you have on hand because you're not going to see much of it, but it should be nice and straight. So what I actually have here is some 5/4 stock. Shoot, actually looking at it, some of it might be 6/4. Now the glue up for this frame is a little bit tricky. It's pretty darn big, so I'm gonna do one corner at a time. So when you do this, gotta make sure everything is nice and square. Hopefully your shoulders are square, that will kind of stack the cards in your favor, but when you bring these pieces together, you wanna make sure there's no gaps, okay, so they're fully pushed into one another, and then we're gonna clamp it and double check where we're at with an actual square and adjust if needed. All right, now this kind of joint, the most important pressure point is to actually squeeze it, sandwich those pieces together. And if you got some good strong spring clamps like this. Those work like a charm. You could certainly use whatever kind of clamp you have on hand. So let's go ahead and get the glue on this bad boy. Tight bond dark again, and I would say especially in a joint like this, where those long joints on the ends will be visible, and you do have the potential for a little bit of a gap there, depending on your dado blade and how flat it cuts and how good you did. A nice brown colored glue would be welcome here. Now, you don't really have to get glue up on the shoulders in there, and in fact, if you put a lot of glue there, it can make it difficult to bring the pieces together for a nice tight shoulder. So you don't have to put it there. If you do, make sure it's a very thin layer, keeping in mind a lot of that's going to get absorbed anyway, so it's really not going to add a ton to the strength of the joint. And also be very careful that you have your pieces straight, meaning this is one of my front pieces, this is a side piece. Don't accidentally glue a front to a back. Now, if you've already looked at the full plans, you might be wondering why some things are there. So if you look at the base, you'll see this additional strip has been added to the inside of the rails. Well, with the frame on top, you can now see the reason why. So we're gonna have slats that will span from side rail to side rail, and this little ledge that's created when the frame drops down on top is what those slats will rest on. All we have here is about a 1/2 inch. So you could rely on that, but ideally, I'd like to have a screw driven through this at a slight angle that goes into that 1/2 inch ledge. Now you can do that, but you're getting awfully close to the end of that slat. So I think it's probably better if we increase the ledge, right? So that's why I have a 3/4 inch add-on piece. This really doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't even have to use walnut if you don't want to, technically. All right, so next up, we're going to add some fine details to the project. First thing is in the headboard, we have those boards that go across between the verticals, and if you're not careful, it kind of looks a little bit like a fence, right? So we need to put some finishing touches on it that makes it look a little bit more design purposeful. Is that a phrase that people use? We want to look like we did things on purpose to make this look like a beautiful piece of furniture. Now, next thing we need to do is come up with a quick way to remove the bulk of this material. You could certainly use your hand plane for the whole thing, but I think the table saw will save us a little bit of time here. So I've got the blade tilted to about 5 degrees. That's not an exact number. You can make it a little bit more, a little bit less, whatever seems to be right for you. Position the fence so that you take just a little bit of a light cut and sneak up on it. What you're looking for is to just save yourself some planing work. We don't really want to establish the entire profile here because we can't. If you cut too far with the blade and you create a nice flat plane, you might not have enough material left to give it that rounded, smooth profile that we're looking for, right? So you do need to be careful with that. Just sneak up on it. Be conservative. You could always remove more stock later. If you remove too much, you're kind of stuck. Now, the other thing I want to mention here is sort of a real life situation for me. We took some time off. My mom, you know this bed is for my mom, she wound up buying her condo and there were cabinets in there that needed to be painted. So I lost about a week and a half on that cabinet project doing the repainting and getting everything done. So now I'm finally back on this project. This is one of the reasons why I warn folks not to take long breaks in the middle of a project if you can avoid it at a critical juncture. Ideally, I would have had all of these slats done and glued into the headboard before this was over, before I went on that other project, because some of these pieces have bowed a little bit. Now, it's not going to hurt anything in the final project, right? It just goes between those verticals, and if there's a slight bow, who cares? The problem, though, is that now I'm going to make a cut here at the table saw, and if I've got a bow in this piece, it means I'm going to remove more stock at the center than at the ends. So you got to be aware of that too. So in case you do have the same problem I did and you took a little time off, just be aware of that when you make these cuts. Be very conservative and also be as safe as possible using a feather board. Now to blend in from the top to this center section that's still flat, easy way to do that is you kind of find the flat in the middle and then just give it a little bit of a tilt from there. This is always your reference point, so you can return to that anytime you need to and tilt as needed. And there's a certain point where you're kind of just going by feel. So believe it or not, most of the woodworking tasks for this project are complete. At this point, we just need to add edge treatments, finish sand, get everything ready so that we can do the final assembly and then apply the finish. So what I'm going to do for the edge treatment is a round over. It's just a simple 1/8 inch round over, just enough to kind of break the edge, give it a little bit of a softer look. Remember, the edge treatments are always to taste. So if you want something that looks a little softer, go with a bigger round over. You want something that makes more of a statement, think about possibly a chamfer. If you don't want to really change the softness at all, just break the edge with sandpaper so that it doesn't cause people to cut themselves when they touch it. That's never a good thing. And what I'm going to use is an 1/8 inch bit in a laminate trimmer. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of these now. Almost every company makes a laminate trimmer that takes batteries. It seems silly, to make such a big deal about something that's battery powered, but not having that cord holding you in place and tethering you, allowing you to go one-handed and zip around all these pieces is a huge time saver. So definitely a good investment, and I like to keep mine locked in with the most commonly used profile that I have. So you'll see.
Now the giant frame is a giant pain in the butt, but the entire thing gets sanded and rounded over. And that's really all there is for finish prep.
So now I'm going to start the glue up. Now you might consider doing a pre-finishing process on this. A lot of these parts certainly would be easier to finish now and then do the assembly later, but that does complicate things as you need to protect your tenons, stop the finish from getting into the mortises. Ultimately, it's up to you how you want to do it. I think for my progression in this video series to show you how things go together, sometimes it just makes a little bit more sense to do the finishing as the very last thing. So that's what we're going to do, but just understand you have options, right? So I'm going to use Titebond 3 here. I could continue using the Titebond Dark that I used before, but I don't think it's really critical either way here. I like to reserve the Titebond Dark for times when the walnut comes together in a visible joint. This is mortise and tenon joinery, so I don't think we have that problem. And I'm going to start with the headboard. We're going to do 1/2 at a time. There's no reason we need to do the entire thing in one shot. This will certainly make our lives a whole lot easier. And the bad part about Rubio is that it's very expensive. The good part is a little bit goes a long way. So I would recommend mixing up less than you think you need. And mix more later if you need more. Now I'm going to apply the finish to one of the supports here so you can get a full experience of what it's like. It's the same process across the rest of the bed. All right, you just take a rag or really anything. I mean, literally, paper towel will work just fine. If you want to do a machine application, you can get a sander or something with a buffing pad on it. In fact, what you probably are used to seeing when you see people apply Rubio is big conference tables. And they're always using giant buffers to do the work, and spreaders, plastic spreaders. On a regular furniture project, we don't often, unless you're doing maybe a tabletop, you don't usually have the need for all that stuff. So apply with a rag, apply very thin, spread a nice even coat, and just keep moving. And Ava, you want to come over here? Here we go. Once in a lifetime opportunity. Hanging out in a bed in the driveway. How about that ending, huh? Yeah. That was just for you guys. Any questions at all that I could answer? Hopefully anyone who saw this, you understand it was chopped up specifically, giving you a nice chunk of material from one video, then moving on to the next video. It's not just bad editing. The total project I think we have is 167 minutes, total of 9 videos. Again, I'm going to mention you're going to get the king and the queen dimensions if you want to build the queen. I built the king version, so that's pretty much what the video references, but it's pretty easy to sub in different numbers for a couple of the rail parts that change. Let's see what else. Sale ends tomorrow, so if you're interested in this project, it is on sale right now. I believe the sale price is about 30% off, but after tomorrow it goes up to full price. So if you have any interest in it, go ahead, go for it. We will have a free site version of this video like we do with all of our guild videos. It'll be a condensed version that just kind of runs through the whole project so you could see how it gets done. You could wait till then to watch that before making the purchase, but it's going to be more expensive. So anything that I can answer for you kind, generous people. I feel like I have to give you an even bigger discount for making you look at those pictures at the end. What do you think? Yeah, maybe not. It's already pretty well discounted. This video, by the way, is going to go away soon after we finish here. This will not be available afterwards. So any questions, anything at all, hit me now. Okay, so Jay Holman says, any problem moving that into the room? I suppose it's like moving a box spring, no bending, etc. Yeah, pretty much. Most of the bed will go through doorways, no problems at all. The only thing that's going to be a little bit awkward with this design is the platform frame. Now you could design it to do something a little bit different. You could make that break down into 4 pieces. I've got mine doing half lap joints. I think that looks really good at the corners. It was worth it for me. But at the height, I'm about 5'11". I can put my fingers on the inside of the frame and just hold it up a couple of inches. And if I'm in the middle, I can carry it myself. It's much easier to carry with 2 people. But that length isn't really so long that you can't get it through a doorway on a slight angle, but it is absolutely best moved by 2 people because it's not heavy, it's just a big square frame. Okay. Tiny Woodshop is concerned about those sharp corners, the sharp edges on the corners. I'm not sure what sharp edges you're referring to. Nothing on this bed was left sharp. Yeah, I like Kimberly. Kimberly, you could stick around for a while. With comments like that, let's hang out. Bob wants to know, could you still use a box spring on that one and have it still work? Maybe the headboard would need to be taller. Yeah, this is always a thing you got to think about. You add a box spring, now you're adding a significant, 6, 8 inches, depending on the box spring. That raises the height, makes the bed taller. If you're okay with a taller bed, you are now going to take up more of the headboard, right? So if you have a particular design, in my case, I did a 4-way book match out of a big piece of walnut that came out really nice. Those top 4 boards are they're meant to be seen together, so I put them in the perfect spot so that with 2 pillows on top of the mattress, you still see that design. The ones below that are a little less spectacular, but you never see them because there's always pillows there. So if you're going to do a box spring, I don't necessarily know that you want to raise the headboard too much higher. It's already 4 feet high. So if you can stand having it higher, if you like the way that looks, you could benefit from that by raising your prettiest panels or your prettiest boards a little bit higher. It's certainly something you could do. I should also mention that this bed, while it will work for a lot of people, my mom is fairly short, and she was very specific about having a bed that didn't require her to go down too far or to go up too high. And she also had a certain amount of clearance that she wanted underneath the bed. So those were the numbers, the max and sort of min, that I had to play with to design within. And I think most average height people will be comfortable with it. But if you are really tall, you might want something a little higher. Maybe that box spring is the answer. Find a really shallow, short box spring. Okay, Scott. Saw it on pre-sale, excited to make it. Any ideas on making it knock down? Well, that's what it is. So there's that. Unless you're talking about the platform frame, I just mentioned that. There are other things you can do for just the simple square frame to make it knock down. That's the only thing on there that really isn't knockdown I mean, you can make it more knockdown. There are pieces that are glued together. The headboard is one piece, the footboard is one piece, but that's pretty typical for beds. You don't normally need to completely knock everything down for it to be, you know, mobile, transportable. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. This is a little bit different. We usually do watch parties. They're not hidden, but we don't really broadcast it. We put them on a different channel. It's just easier. And sometimes, you know, on our main channel, there's a lot of people, and a lot of people are there for different reasons. So something like this can tend, like, it takes a couple of people off. So we usually kind of keep this hidden. But at the same time, this is a good price. It's a discount. We want you guys to know about it. And it's not like I'm hitting you with, you know, an ad for a grill, which I don't know, I might do that someday. This is an internal product. This is something that we sell. If you support what we do, you probably shouldn't get too bent out of shape about me telling you about a cool thing you can do to get more woodworking education that also helps support us. You know, it's kind of a little back and forth sort of thing. So we appreciate everybody hanging out and taking a moment to watch this video. Okay. So yeah, we do a watch party for every new project. We will continue to do them in the future, even the ones with guest instructors. We'd still like to do that. And if you guys like this, we'll open it up. We'll keep it on the Wood Whisperer channel. You get this little preview night. And then at least, look, if you're going to spend the kind of money, guild projects are not cheap. If you're going to spend that money, you should really know what you're getting into. Know what you're paying for, right? And that's the whole point of the watch party. All right. Okay, I got to answer this one. Patrick Pendergast wants to know, how would the frame hold up to racking? You know what I'm talking about, but seriously. Look, man, this is my mom's bed. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to do to my head here? I don't want to think about that. My mom says, she's like, what if I decide to get a boyfriend? I'm like, that's impossible. It won't happen. So, like, let's not talk about it. It'll be fine. Just don't rack it too much. It's just wood. Festool Connect. If you are a domino user and you want to incorporate dominoes, the Festool Connect system, it's really expensive, but I got to tell you, it is one of the best systems out there for knockdown solutions. It's absolutely amazing. So if you already have the domino, and maybe you were going to use domino joints in place of the standard mortise and tenon joinery that I show here, 100% the domino connectors are an excellent choice for a bed project like this. You might consider maybe the XL size for this one. You could probably make it work with the others, but I would be inclined to push toward the XL, just for the heck of it. Yep, Scott, there are indeed a series of slats under the bed for support. The mattress itself sits on top of those slats. Those slats bear, the weight is pushed to the outside rails, but also a center rail. And that center rail, because you can't see it, I've got supports that give direct ground contact at the center, so that actually takes the lion's share of the weight, which is what allows us to have fairly narrow bed rails on the sides. Normally, you know, a bed rail is usually 4 inches, 5, 6 inches wide, and that's good. You need that for support. But in this case, they're fairly, because of the measurement restrictions, they're a little bit narrow, but we get a lot of support with direct contact in the center where most of the weight is, and then it's just a little bit of weight is distributed to the outside. Alrighty. So it looks like Nicole posted, she's posting as me in the chat, so she posted a link. If you guys are interested in joining the guild, if this is your first project, you'll get all the other benefits that come with the guild membership, so that's always cool. Oh, here's a good question. Yeah, Austin, if this wasn't a video project, would you have used the domino, or was it a design choice? There are very few projects, like let's take the internet out of it. Let's just say I'm building things for clients. Very few of my projects that contain a mortise and tenon would be done the old-fashioned way. I would probably do about 99% of my mortise and tenon joinery would be done with the domino because time is money, and it's still really good quality joinery. It's just you need this machine to do it, which is why it doesn't always work when you're teaching other people. So yeah, I would use I would use the heck out of that domino. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you hanging out with us. If you are interested in more of this talkie stuff, we do it every Friday. We got another one coming tomorrow. I think 9:30, Nicole. I think it is. It's Friday. Well, it used to be Friday Live. Now it's the Woodworking Morning Show. That's on our Offcuts channel. but you could find that tomorrow, 9:30. So it's always a good time, and you get to see Nicole's smiling face. All right, thank you, everybody. I hope you're doing well, and yeah, toodles, I guess. We'll see you later. Bye.